a balancer and as a very rich, nutrient, mineral-rich supplement. And so the truth of it is, and you guys can do your own research about it, but the truth of it is that when you go to a health food store and buy supplements, those supplements, by and large, are there to try to get some trace minerals that are already in this natural salt. And if you'll take a teaspoon of this salt every day, you're getting a salt in a form that your body will utilize very quickly and efficiently. And it'll take it into the cellular structure because it's in the form of the salt, and the cellular structure, as Jerry can talk about from, what do you call it, biomechanics? Physiology. That's the way our body transfers through the cell wall and back out. The mitochondria, the action of normal metabolism are all made more efficient by the use of these natural salts. And so it's really good stuff. It's been about 4 or 5 minutes. You want to check your blood sugar again?
You want to check yours first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, however you want to do it, guys. And then just kind of tell us the results. But
I have to ask a question.
Yes.
Now, I've been in one of the salt mines in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that salt the same then?
Any salt.
Huge deposits. I mean, I assume deposits of salt. That mine was huge.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm supposed to bring this over and let you, let me get one of these off here. I'm technologically challenged, so hang on here just a minute. Oh, okay. She had said in Germany, she went to some salt mines there, and she's asking if it's the same salt. There are a lot of different mines. Some are very shallow. Some are formed under different conditions. Some salt is white when it's mined. And here's what this mine does, where they mine it here, this real salt. Even if they have veins of this salt underground that are white, immediately under them are very rich deposits of the minerals that came from that. And it's kind of like when you find gold in quartz primarily. So it sets up a situation where you find those two together. And usually where you find salt, you find that salt very rich with natural minerals. And it has to be processed to turn it into a pure white form. And so these deposits that they have in actually central Utah are just very rich in mineral. In fact, there's a book by Dr. David Brownstein, and it's called Salt Your Way to Health. And in that book, he gives a short essay of the salt content and the mineral content of two of the most popular sea salts. And one of them is called Celtic salt. Have any of you ever heard of that or that salt? And the other one is this Redmond real salt. And here's something that he states in that book that's really important. And I want to do this just to kind of lock something in your mind. I want everybody to say this, repeat after me. Salt is our friend.
Salt is our friend.
Sodium is our friend.
Sodium is our friend.
And what have we been taught about salt and sodium? Absolutely. So, are you ready for a paradigm change? Because this is what it's all about. And what he explains in his book is that this real salt has a higher concentration of sodium than many of the other salts. Any of you ever heard of Himalayan pink salt? It's marketed as a lower sodium salt. So literally, if you're using Himalayan pink salt to try to control blood sugars, you're not going to be as effective with doing that as you will with this real salt. The biggest value of greenzymes is the fact that it has one of the highest concentrations of natural sodium in it. If you're talking to somebody with challenges like gout, severe acid reflux, really a severe acid condition, one of the best ways to take that in the form of nutrition is jade greenzymes because of its high concentration of sodium. Celery has been used for generations to treat conditions of gout because that's the second highest concentration of sodium is just natural celery. So sodium is really a good thing. But anytime sodium is associated with sulfated aluminum and chlorine in the form of table salt, it creates more challenges than it makes better.
Went from 109 to 99.
10 points.
I'm going to have to get me something to eat
You go ahead. Yeah. You go ahead. Yeah. And that's going to help. And what about yours? 202 to 189, 22 points. Or 13 points. What do you think about that?
That's good.
What does it mean to be able to control that without having to do a shot or take in some other? Amen. And yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we did a test yesterday with someone who he said, my blood sugar is low.
Mm-hmm.
And actually it brought it a little bit up. So does it normalize it or?
Absolutely. Now, here's the thing about balance in the body. Greenzymes, I had a challenge with low blood sugar for about 12 years called hypoglycemia. And this same medical doctor that introduced me to this book, we were having lunch. You know, the first day in Humans Being More, when you go to lunch with your team, he was on my team. And I'd been dealing with this low blood sugar for about 12 years. And we got ready to go back. And he said, are you going to have some dessert before we go back? And I said, no, I don't want to upset my blood sugar. And he said, what's wrong with it? And I said, I have hypoglycemia. And he said, well, just get you a teaspoon of Greenzymes every morning and a little Pymag water, and you won't ever have that problem again. Now, here's a medical doctor, right? My wife, we don't know anything about this. We've only been involved with Nikin for about 3 weeks, okay? And my wife and I look at each other and say, you know, well, he's a doctor, you know, whatever. So we come home and order some green enzymes, and I start taking it. In 7 years, I've had 3 episodes of low blood sugar. I do it every morning when I get up, first thing that I put in my body. Well, it'll also lower high blood sugar. That's what's happening here in just a matter of a few minutes. So when you get your body in balance, when you give it the raw materials that it wants and needs, it'll bring a balance either way. So thank you for sharing that.
For someone who has diabetes and is on a pump or is taking insulin, what do you suggest that they just start doing this and then measure and not take the insulin unless it's...
Okay, let's just talk about that. We're not medical people, but here, the question is, what should we do? What's the protocol, so to speak, to get started on this program? I'm going to send you to a book called The pH Miracle for Diabetics. The author is Robert Young. Remember Father Knows Best? That's the way I keep that straight. Robert Young. We carry this book into those clinics when we work with people, because it's a book with studies in there that he's done. He's written the book. He's published his studies. And that's our credibility, because we don't have any in the medical field. But here's basically what he does with anybody challenged with blood sugar issues. A mineral-rich water, oxygenated water, a green barley product. They call it a green drink is what they call it in that particular book. And then this natural salt, and he names it by its trade name. Calls it real salt, talks about it, and explains the fact that if you put chlorinated salt in your body, it will challenge your blood sugar issues. And the reason that it does is because of the presence of chlorine. When chlorine goes in, then it immediately engages the immune system. What's chlorine designed to do in our economy? Kill living things, right? And so when we put it into our body recognizes that and says, we've got to do something with it immediately, or it would kill the cellular structure in the mouth and so on. So it totally engages it until it can either encapsulate it or render it harmless, one or the other. And we don't like chlorine, and yet we owe it a tremendous debt. I believe if it wasn't for chlorine, we'd still be having people dying of cholera and other waterborne parasites and so on. But we don't need it in our bodies. Batman Gelage, when he speaks to people all over the world about this stuff, he says his answer is take chlorinated water and draw it out the night before and leave it in an open container and just let that chlorine, which will naturally turn to a gas, dissipate. And then you don't have that challenge with it. We've got a better process, don't we? Mag water, and that's a good way to go. But basically those three things: water, nutrition, salt. And here's his published results. You'll find them on page 20 of his book. He has on that page type 1 diabetics, type 2 diabetics. And on this program, in 12 weeks of alkalizing the body using primarily salt, water, and barley grass, 96% reduction in medications from type 2 diabetics, 80% reduction in medications for type 1s. That's his published results. You go buy the book, check it out. And he will tell you that the answer for that is to bring your body into an alkaline state, which includes bringing the minerals up so that your body has all the raw materials to properly metabolize. Dr. Batman-Gelich talks about the fact that your body cannot make efficient hydrochloric acid for the total breakdown of proteins without all the elements of this natural salt. If you put table salt on your food, there's not sufficient minerals there to make efficient hydrochloric acid, therefore it doesn't break down the proteins. And if you don't get proper breakdown of those things, what's the chances of you getting them ingested into the cellular structure? Not going to be there. Now, why don't we know this stuff? It's interesting to note that we're the only country in the world that eats white table salt.
White flour.
We're the only country in the world. And I share that with people. I shared this with a running coach, a cross-country coach out of Shiprock, New Mexico, as one of the winningest cross-country college teams in the United States. And we introduced this salt and the Mag water to their teams about 4 years ago. And he's from South Africa. And I was telling him that we're the only country in the world that eats white salt. And he didn't believe that. He didn't say anything to me. The next time I saw him, he says, "Hey, man, you're right about that salt." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I called my mom in Africa." And I said, "Mom, what color's the salt in Africa?" He said, "Well, you can get that white stuff, but it's no good. Ours is brown." And then he called a friend that he used to compete with out of Italy. And he says, "What color's the salt over there?" And he said, "Well, you can get that white stuff from America, but nobody here eats it." He said, "Ours is gray. It's a very rich mineral salt." You go to Mexico. Their salt is kind of a gray, but it hasn't been adulterated with chlorine. It hasn't been adulterated with different processes, so the body recognizes it. And even though they have a lot of nutritional challenges that we don't have here, they're basically healthier than we are because they get that in the basic salts that they make their foods with. And everybody says, "Well, does that include margaritas?" Yeah, you can put this salt on your margaritas too. So. Any other questions about this? Did you check your blood sugar? Or no? Okay. Excuse me.
What's the difference between Mag water and maybe distilled water?
Good question. Excellent question. He wants to know what the difference is between Mag water and like distilled water. Let's talk about water a little bit. The first place that your body goes to look for mineral is your water source. And in this country, we have two huge challenges. First is our tap water. Does anybody recognize that there's some pollution in our tap water? Okay. They use chemical flocculants, what they call, to bring the turbidity out of it. Those residues are in that water. Chlorine, sometimes fluoride. And then besides that, all of the, does anybody in this part of the world use maybe chemicals on their lawn? No, not in this part of the world. All of those things end up in our water, and the only responsibility of your municipality is to get the mud and the grit out of it, called turbidity, and then to treat it for waterborne pathogens. That's all they're responsible to do. And so when we get that water at our tap, we need to realize that there's some real challenges with that. The AP has printed 3 articles in the last 2 years, the Associated Press, about all the contaminants that are in our water, including prescription drugs. hormones.